She had one rule, one night only. He had one problem. He couldn't stop showing up everywhere. And when she finally turned around, she realized he'd been fighting for her all along. Welcome back, my dark romance lovers. I hope you had a wonderful holiday season. Comment below the city you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Your support truly keeps this channel growing. The auction hall at the Hôtel de Paris Monte Carlo was the kind of place where silence had a price tag. Auckland Laurent moved through spaces like this with controlled ease, deliberate, untouchable. She stood near the back in a red dress, her brown skin glowing under the chandeliers. She was here representing a client acquiring a controlling stake in a struggling heritage watch brand, and she intended to secure the deal without fanfare. She had built her career on being the woman who got what she wanted. Luxury brand crisis consulting was a game of patience and power, and Auckland had mastered both. She had also mastered emotional detachment, born from necessity rather than ambition. There had been a time, years ago, when she'd been foolish enough to believe love could be permanent. At 19, she stood in the rain outside Owen Whitley's estate, watching him choose his parents' approval over her. That night, she made herself a promise. No man would ever have the power to hurt her again. The auctioneer's voice pulled her back. The watch brand's equity shares were up next. Auckland raised her paddle with calm precision. Someone countered. She raised again. The room settled into rhythm, the numbers climbing as competition thinned. And then, she felt it. A shift in the air that made her spine straighten and her pulse quicken. She turned her head slightly, just enough to catch a glimpse of the man who had entered the room. Wesley Parker moved like he owned the space before stepping into it. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a suit tailored to perfection. His presence was quiet, but filled the room anyway. He looked directly at the display, then, as if feeling her gaze, directly at her. Their eyes met, and Auckland felt something she hadn't felt in years. Uncertainty. It lasted only a second before she crushed it, but it had been there, and she knew he'd seen it. Wesley raised his paddle. Auckland's spine stiffened. She countered immediately. He raised again, expression unreadable. The auctioneer's voice climbed higher, numbers spiraling past projected value. The room went still. Watching the silent battle between the composed woman in the back and the self-made billionaire who'd walked in like he had nothing to prove. Auckland raised her paddle one more time. She didn't take her eyes off Wesley. He tilted his head slightly, the corner of his mouth lifting. Then he raised his paddle again, the bid climbing to a number that made even seasoned investors shift. The auctioneer paused, looking at Auckland. She held Wesley's gaze for a long moment. She could keep going, but she'd been in this business long enough to know when a battle wasn't worth the cost. She lowered her paddle and inclined her head in the smallest gesture of concession. Wesley won. But when the auction ended and the crowd dispersed, he didn't leave. He walked directly toward her. Auckland waited, posture relaxed, expression neutral. When he stopped in front of her, she tilted her head up. He was even more striking up close, with sharp cheekbones and a presence that commanded attention without demanding it. "You let me win," he said. His voice was low, smooth, with just enough edge to make it interesting. "I did," Auckland replied. "Your bid exceeded my client's budget." "That's not why you stopped," she raised an eyebrow. "You think you know me?" "I think you wanted to see what I'd do next." Auckland allowed herself a small smile. "And what are you going to do next, Mr. Parker?" "Buy you a drink." "I don't accept drinks from strangers." "We're not strangers anymore," he said. "You know my name. I know yours." The tension between them was tangible, threading through the air like smoke. Auckland could feel it settling over her skin, making her hyper-aware of the space between them, the way his gaze didn't waver, the way her pulse quickened, despite every instinct telling her to walk away. "One drink," she said finally, "and then I'm leaving." Wesley's smile was slow, confident, far too knowing. "We'll see." They ended up at a private lounge overlooking the harbor, dim lighting and champagne. Oakland studied him the way she would study a brand she was considering for consultation. The conversation moved from business to travel to carefully curated details. Oakland knew how to reveal just enough without giving anything real, but Wesley was better than most at reading between the lines, cataloging every word, every pause, every deflection. When the conversation lulled, Wesley leaned forward. "What are you afraid of, Oakland?" The question caught her off guard, but she didn't let it show. "I'm not afraid of anything." "Everyone's afraid of something." "Then maybe I'm just better at hiding it." Wesley smiled. "I don't think you're hiding. I think you're running." Oakland's expression didn't change, but something inside her shifted. She set down her glass. "If I am, it's none of your concern." "Maybe not," Wesley said, "but I'm still interested." Oakland stood, smoothing her dress. Wesley stood with her. They were close now, close enough that she could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his jaw tightened. "One night," she said, her voice low and steady. "That's all you get." Wesley's eyes darkened, but his expression remained calm. "And if I want more?" "You won't," Oakland said, "because I don't do more." She turned and walked toward the exit, knowing without looking back that he would follow. And he did. Wesley's suite at the Hotel de Paris was exactly what Oakland expected. She had been in suites like this before, after closing deals, navigating crises for clients, celebrating survival. He poured them both a drink at the bar near the window, his movements deliberate and unhurried, as if he had all the time in the world. Oakland accepted the glass and took a slow sip, watching him over the rim. He was studying her the same way she was studying him, and the awareness made the air feel charged. "You're very sure of yourself," Wesley said, leaning against the bar with an ease that suggested he was used to being exactly where he wanted to be. "So are you," Oakland replied. "The difference is, I have reason to be." She raised an eyebrow. "And I don't?" "I didn't say that." Wesley took a drink, his eyes never leaving hers. "But I think your confidence is a performance, a very convincing one, but a performance nonetheless." Oakland set her glass down on the bar with a soft clink. "You've known me for 2 hours. You don't know anything about me." "I know you let me win that auction when you didn't have to," Wesley said. "I know you agreed to have a drink with a stranger even though you claim not to do that. And I know you're here right now because you want to be, not because I convinced you." "Maybe I'm just curious," Oakland said. "About what?" "About whether you're worth breaking my rule for." Wesley's smile was slow and entirely too confident. "And what's the verdict?" "I haven't decided yet." He moved closer, closing the distance between them with the kind of precision that made Oakland's pulse quicken despite herself. He stopped just short of touching her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, close enough that she had to tilt her head slightly to meet his gaze. "You don't believe in your own rule," Wesley said quietly. "Excuse me. One night. No exceptions," he continued. "It's a good rule. Clean. Simple. But you don't actually believe it works." Her spine stiffened. "You think you've figured me out already?" "I think you made that rule because someone hurt you," Wesley said. "And I think you've spent years convincing yourself that control is the same thing as protection." The words landed with more weight than Oakland wanted to admit. She could have deflected, could have made a joke or changed the subject. But something about the way he was looking at her made her want to push back instead. "And what about you?" she asked, her voice edged with challenge. "What are you running from, Wesley Parker?" His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Who says I'm running?" "Everyone's running from something," Oakland said, throwing his earlier words back at him. "You just hide it better than most." Wesley laughed, a low sound that rumbled through the space between them. "Touché." They stood there, locked in a silent standoff that felt more intimate than anything Oakland had experienced in years. Wesley reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers grazing her cheek with a touch so light it almost didn't register. "I'm not afraid of you, Oakland," he said softly. "You should be." "Why?" Because I don't lose control, she said. Not for anyone. Wesley's hand moved to the back of her neck, his fingers threading through her hair with a firmness that made her breath catch. Then let's see how long that lasts. He kissed her before she could respond, and the impact of it was immediate and overwhelming. There was nothing tentative about the way his mouth moved against hers, nothing cautious or restrained. It was acclaiming, pure and simple, and Oakland felt something inside her crack open despite every wall she had built to keep it contained. She kissed him back with equal intensity, her hands fisting in the fabric of his shirt as she pulled him closer. The taste of him was intoxicating, the feel of his body against hers even more so. She had kissed men before, had shared nights with men who knew what they were doing, but this was different. This felt like losing and winning at the same time, like stepping off a cliff and discovering she could fly. The kiss turned desperate, hungry, as if they were both trying to consume something they couldn't name. Wesley's hand slid down her sides with deliberate slowness, mapping every curve, every dip, like he was committing her to memory. Oakland's breath came faster, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she was certain he could feel it. She had never wanted someone like this, had never felt her control unraveling with just a touch, and the realization should have terrified her. Instead, it made her pull him closer. Oakland's mind was screaming at her to slow down, to reassert control, to remind him and herself that this was just one night and nothing more. But her body wasn't listening. Her body wanted more. They made their way to the bedroom in a tangle of heated kisses and discarded clothing, the tension that had been building between them all night finally finding its release. Wesley laid her down on the bed with a reverence that felt at odds with the raw desire in his eyes, and Oakland reached for him, pulling him down to her with a need that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Wesley's eyes locked on hers as the last barriers between them fell away, and the intensity in his gaze made something twist deep in her chest. He leaned down, his mouth finding the sensitive spot just below her ear, and whispered against her skin, "You're mine tonight." The possessiveness in his voice should have made her push him away, should have reminded her of all the reasons she kept her distance. Instead, Oakland arched into him, feeling his hardness, her control slipping through her fingers like sand, and for the first time in years, she let it go. And when it was over, when they lay tangled together in the sheets with the moonlight spilling across the floor, Oakland felt something she hadn't felt in years. Vulnerable. She woke before dawn, the way she always did. The suite was still dark, the city outside barely stirring. Wesley was asleep beside her, his breathing deep and even, one arm draped across her waist in a way that felt far too familiar. Oakland carefully extracted herself from his hold and slipped out of bed, gathering her clothes as quietly as she could. She dressed quickly, her movements efficient and practiced. This was the part she was good at. The leaving, the clean break, the reminder that this was just one night and nothing more. She had done this a dozen times before, and it had never bothered her. But as she glanced back at Wesley, still asleep in the bed they had shared, she felt a flicker of something she didn't want to name. She pushed it down and walked toward the door. Leaving without saying goodbye? Oakland froze, her hand on the door handle. She turned to find Wesley sitting up in bed, the sheets pooled around his waist, his expression unreadable in the low light. "I don't do goodbyes," she said. "Of course you don't." Wesley swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood, pulling on the pants he'd discarded hours earlier. He crossed the room toward her, and Oakland forced herself to stay still, to not retreat even as every instinct told her to run. "I want to see you again," Wesley said. Oakland shook her head. "That's not how this works." "Why not?" "Because I told you the rules," she said. "One night. No exceptions." Wesley studied her for a long moment, his gaze searching hers in a way that made her feel exposed. "And what if I don't accept your rules?" "Then you're wasting your time," Oakland said. "I don't do this, Wesley. I don't do relationships. I don't do repeats. I fix broken brands for a living, not broken people. And I certainly don't fix myself. Why not? Because I don't want to. It was a lie, and they both knew it. But Oakland held his gaze, daring him to call her on it. Wesley's jaw tightened, and for a moment, she thought he might argue. Might push back the way he had pushed back on everything else she'd said tonight. But instead, he stepped aside, giving her a clear path to the door. "You're lying to yourself," he said quietly. Oakland's hand tightened on the door handle. "Goodbye, Wesley." She walked out before he could respond, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she made her way to the elevator. She didn't look back. She never looked back. But as the elevator doors closed and she caught her reflection in the polished metal, she saw something in her own eyes that she hadn't seen in years. Doubt. Wesley Parker had gotten under her skin, and Oakland hated him for it. 3 days after Monaco, Oakland was in London. She had flown in that morning to manage a crisis for a historic British luxury hotel chain, whose CEO had just been caught in a financial scandal, her calendar packed with back-to-back damage control meetings that left no room for distraction. This was exactly how she preferred it. Work was clean, predictable, and entirely within her control. It didn't ask questions she couldn't answer, and it didn't linger in her thoughts when she tried to sleep at night. Unlike Wesley Parker. Oakland stood in the hotel's executive boardroom, arms crossed as she reviewed the crisis management proposal. But today, the numbers and strategies felt like background noise. Her mind kept drifting back to Monaco, to the suite overlooking the harbor, to the way Wesley had looked at her when she walked out the door. She could still feel the weight of his gaze, the way it had followed her all the way to the elevator, as if he was cataloging every step she took away from him. She hated that she remembered it so clearly. This was why the rule existed. This exact feeling. The way one night could bleed into the next day and the day after that, staining her thoughts with someone who was supposed to be gone. Oakland had learned a long time ago that emotions were liabilities, and attachment was a weakness she couldn't afford. She had built her life on distance and discipline, and she wasn't about to let one man unravel years of careful construction just because he knew how to kiss. Her phone buzzed in her bag. She pulled it out, expecting a message from her client or her assistant. Instead, it was from an unknown number. "Still running?" Oakland's jaw tightened. She didn't need to ask who it was. She deleted the message without responding and slipped the phone back into her bag. By the time she returned to her hotel that evening, she had convinced herself the message didn't matter. Wesley Parker was a distraction, nothing more. He would lose interest soon enough. Men like him always did. They liked the chase, the challenge. But once the novelty wore off, they moved on. Oakland poured herself a glass of wine and settled onto the couch, pulling up her laptop to review the day's notes. She worked for hours, losing herself in the rhythm of reputation repair and strategic messaging. Past midnight, she finally closed the laptop and allowed herself to admit the truth she had been avoiding. She missed him. Not in the way she had missed Owen all those years ago, with the desperate, aching need of someone who didn't know how to let go. This was different, quieter, more insidious. It wasn't about needing Wesley. It was about wanting him. And wanting was almost worse because it implied choice. She had chosen to spend the night with him. She had chosen to let him touch her, to let him see parts of herself she kept hidden from everyone else. And now she was paying the price for that choice. Oakland set her wine glass down and leaned back against the couch, closing her eyes. He was just one night. He had to be. The Maison Delacroix headquarters occupied an entire corner building in the 8th arrondissement, all cream-colored stone and wrought-iron balconies. Oakland had been here once before, when the luxury fashion house was still thriving. But that was before the scandal, before the hostile takeover attempt. Before the board fractured into warring factions threatening to destroy 150 years of legacy. The current creative director had called her in desperation. The brand was hemorrhaging value. Oakland had agreed without hesitation. Paris in the spring was one of her favorite places to work, and salvaging a house as iconic as Delacroix would be career-defining. She should have known better than to expect straightforward. The reception area was empty when she arrived. Oakland made her way toward the executive offices, her heels clicking against the marble floors. The door to the boardroom was open, and she could see someone standing inside, examining something on the wall. She knew who it was before he turned around. Wesley Parker stood in front of a framed sketch from Delacroix's 1952 collection, hands in the pockets of his navy suit. He looked entirely too comfortable, and Oakland felt anger rise in her chest, even as her pulse quickened. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sharp. Wesley turned slowly, calm satisfaction on his face. "Good morning, Oakland. Answer the question." "I own the company," he said simply. Oakland's breath caught. "Excuse me." "I finalized the acquisition 3 days ago, 51% controlling stake. Your client reached out to my team requesting crisis management support. When I saw your name on the consultant list, I took the meeting personally." "You're lying." Wesley pulled his phone from his pocket and turned the screen toward her. The headline was clear. Parker Industries acquires majority stake in struggling fashion house Delacroix. The date stamp was from 2 days ago. Oakland's hands curled into fists. She wanted to walk out, to leave him standing there with his smug expression. But she couldn't. Her reputation depended on delivering results, and refusing to work with Wesley would mean admitting he'd gotten under her skin. "This is unethical," she said, her voice tight. "How so?" "You bought a company just to force me into a room with you." "I bought a company because it was undervalued," Wesley corrected. "The fact that you were already consulting for them was fortunate timing." "Fortunate. For me, yes." Oakland took a slow breath. "I could walk away right now." "You could," Wesley agreed, "but you won't." "Why not?" "Because you don't walk away from challenges, and despite how angry you are, you're curious about what I'm going to do next." He wasn't wrong. Oakland held his gaze, her mind working through her options. She could leave and damage her reputation. She could stay and give Wesley access to her. Or she could stay and prove she was capable of maintaining her boundaries. "One meeting," she said finally. "We discussed the brand's crisis strategy. Nothing more." Wesley's smile was slow. "Of course. Shall we have dinner to go over the details?" "Absolutely not." "Lunch then." "A business meeting. In this office, with your executive team present." Wesley tilted his head. "If that's what you need to feel safe, I can arrange it." "I don't need to feel safe," Oakland snapped. "I need to do my job." "Understood," Wesley said. "We should discuss the brand strategy." He stopped close enough that she could smell his cologne, something that made her think of Monaco and silk sheets and choices she shouldn't have made. "I told you I wanted to see you again," Wesley said quietly. "You made it clear you weren't going to make that easy. So I found another way. By buying a company. By creating a situation where you couldn't dismiss me as easily as you did in Monaco." Oakland's jaw tightened. "You can't manipulate your way past my boundaries." "I'm not trying to manipulate you," he said. "I'm trying to give you a reason to stay long enough to realize that what happened between us wasn't just one night for me. And I don't think it was for you either." The words hit harder than Oakland wanted to admit. She could feel her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. But admitting that would mean admitting she had been lying to herself. "You're wrong," she said. "Am I?" "Yes." Wesley studied her, then stepped back. "We should discuss the brand strategy. I have concerns about the current creative direction. I'd like your assessment of whether Delacroix can be saved or if we're better off liquidating." Oakland blinked, thrown by the sudden shift. This was safer ground. "I'll need full access to the financials," she said, "and I'll need to speak with the creative director, the board, and your acquisition team." "Done. My assistant will arrange everything." "I'll need a week. Take 2 if you need it." "And I want it clear that this is a professional engagement," Oakland continued. "Whatever happened in Monaco stays in Monaco." Wesley's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Understood." "Good. On one condition." Oakland's eyes narrowed. "I'm not negotiating with you." "Have dinner with me tonight," Wesley said, "to discuss the brand. I have insights about the acquisition you'll need." We can discuss that here. We could, he agreed. But I'd prefer somewhere more comfortable. It was a trap. But it was also true that she would need his perspective, and refusing would make her look like she was running. One dinner, Oakland said. Strictly business. Wesley's smile was slight but unmistakable. Of course. The restaurant was small and elegant, tucked into a quiet street near the Seine. Oakland hated that she noticed these details, hated even more that she appreciated them. They sat across from each other, tension palpable. Wesley ordered wine without asking her preference, and when it arrived, she took a sip and found that he had chosen perfectly. Of course he had. "You're angry with me," Wesley said. "I'm not angry," Oakland replied. "I'm annoyed." "What's the difference?" "Anger implies I care." Wesley leaned back, studying her. "You do care. That's why you're here." "I'm here because you bought a company I was hired to save," Oakland said. "This is work." "Is it?" "Yes." "Then why haven't you asked me a single question about Delacroix?" Oakland's fork paused. He was right. She set it down. "What do you want from me, Wesley?" "I told you in Monaco," he said. "I want to see you again." "And I told you that's not how this works." "Why not?" "Because I don't do this," Oakland said, frustration edging her voice. "I don't do relationships. I don't do repeats. I fix broken brands for a living, Wesley. I don't fix broken people. And I certainly don't fix myself." "You keep saying that," Wesley said. "But I don't think you believe it. You don't know me." "I know you're lying to yourself," he said. "I know you felt the same thing I did in Monaco. And I know you're sitting here because part of you wants this as much as I do." Oakland's breath caught. She wanted to deny it, but the truth sat heavy in her chest. She did want this. She wanted him. And that terrified her. "I can't," she said quietly. "Why not?" "Because the last time I let myself want someone, it destroyed me." The words were out before she could stop them, raw and unfiltered. Wesley's expression softened. "I'm not him," Wesley said. "You don't know who he is." "I don't need to," he said. "I know he hurt you. I know he made you believe that wanting someone is dangerous. But I'm not going to hurt you, Oakland. You can't promise that." "No," Wesley admitted. "But I can promise I'm not going anywhere." Oakland looked away, her throat tight. The memory of Owen standing in the rain, choosing his family over her, was still too vivid. "I need to go," she said, standing abruptly. Wesley stood with her. "Oakland." She paused, her hand on the back of her chair. "I meant what I said," Wesley continued. "I'm not going anywhere. When you're ready, I'll be here." Oakland didn't respond. She turned and walked out, her heart pounding. She made it halfway down the block before she had to stop, leaning against a building to steady her breathing. He had gotten under her skin. Again. And this time, she wasn't sure she could shake him loose. Oakland had convinced herself that Dubai would be different. The crisis was straightforward. A luxury hotel group facing a PR nightmare after their CEO made inflammatory comments during a live interview. The board needed someone who could control the narrative before investors pulled funding. Oakland had handled worse. She flew in on a Tuesday, her schedule packed with emergency board meetings and media strategy sessions that would leave no room for distractions. No room for thoughts of Wesley Parker and the way he had looked at her in Paris when she walked out of that restaurant. She checked into the Burj Al Arab and went straight to work. By Thursday, she had stabilized the crisis and was preparing for the investor summit that would determine whether the hotel group survived. It was the kind of high-pressure situation that usually energized her. And then, Wesley bought the competing hotel chain. Oakland found out during the pre-summit cocktail reception, standing on a rooftop terrace with untouched champagne. One of the investors mentioned it casually. Parker Industries had just entered the luxury hospitality market in the region. The acquisition had closed that morning. Wesley now owned the Zahara Hotel Group, the second largest luxury chain in the Emirates. Oakland's grip on her champagne flute tightened. Her eyes swept the terrace before she could stop herself. "Looking for someone?" His voice came from directly behind her, low and familiar. Oakland turned slowly, forcing her expression neutral even as her pulse quickened. Wesley stood there in a white dinner jacket that made him look unfairly elegant, his hands in his pockets, his expression calm. "You bought a hotel chain," Oakland said. "I did. In Dubai. The market was undervalued," Wesley said. "It made strategic sense. You're following me." "I'm expanding my portfolio," he corrected. "The fact that you happen to be working in the same city is coincidental." "There's nothing coincidental about this." Wesley's smile was slight, but undeniable. "You're right. But I prefer to think of it as strategic timing rather than following." Oakland should have walked away. Instead, she stood there, with the city spread out below them, and let herself look at him the way she had wanted to since Paris. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "I told you in Monaco," Wesley said. "I want to see you again. So you're buying companies and showing up in every city I work in? Would you prefer I send flowers? I'd prefer you respect my boundaries." Wesley moved closer, and Oakland's breath caught. He stopped close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "I do respect your boundaries," he said. "That's why I'm here, instead of at your hotel room door. That's why I'm waiting for you to admit what we both already know." "And what's that?" "That you want this as much as I do." Oakland's jaw tightened. She wanted to deny it, wanted to tell him he was wrong, but the words wouldn't come, because he wasn't wrong. She did want him, and the realization was terrifying. "I can't," she said. "Why not?" "Because I don't know how to do this without losing myself." The admission hung between them, raw and honest, but Wesley didn't look triumphant. He looked at her with something that might have been understanding, and it made her chest ache. "You won't lose yourself," Wesley said quietly. "Not with me. You can't promise that." "No," he agreed, "but I can promise I won't ask you to be anyone other than who you are." Oakland looked away, her throat tight. This was exactly what she had been afraid of. This feeling of wanting something she couldn't control. "I should go," she said. Wesley didn't try to stop her. He just nodded. "I'm staying at the Zahara if you change your mind." Oakland forced herself to walk away, her heels clicking against the terrace floor. She made it to the elevator before her hands started shaking. She made it to her suite before she had to lean against the door and take several long breaths. Wesley Parker was getting under her skin in ways she couldn't afford. She would finish the job in Dubai, then make it clear that whatever this was needed to end. The next morning, a package arrived at her suite. Oakland stared at the elegant black box on her coffee table, her heart already knowing what this meant. She opened it slowly, carefully. Inside was a vintage Cartier watch from the 1980s, the exact model she had worn during her first major career win 7 years ago. She had lost it during a trip to Hong Kong and had never been able to find a replacement. The note tucked inside was simple, written in Wesley's distinctive handwriting. "For someone who values time as much as you do." Oakland sank onto the couch, the watch cradled in her hands. This wasn't just a gift. This was proof that Wesley had been paying attention in ways that went far beyond attraction. He had remembered a detail she had mentioned in passing, something most people would have forgotten immediately. He wasn't supposed to remember things like this, but he did. And that scared her more than anything else he had done. If this story has you hooked, tap like and subscribe for more dark billionaire romance stories. 3 weeks after Dubai, Oakland stood in the gilded ballroom of the Metropolitan Club and knew exactly where Wesley was without looking. She had flown into New York for a charity gala, telling herself it was for professional reasons, that if Wesley happened to be there, it wouldn't matter. Both statements were lies. He was across the room, speaking with investors, his presence commanding attention without demanding it. Oakland kept her focus on her own conversation, while her awareness tracked his movements like a compass finding north. This was becoming a problem. When Wesley finally approached her near the bar, she had been expecting it for so long that the moment felt inevitable. "You're avoiding me," he said. "I'm networking," Oakland replied without looking at him. "You've been standing in the same spot for 10 minutes. She turned to face him then, and the impact of seeing him up close made her chest tighten. He looked unfairly good in his tuxedo, his expression calm, but his eyes betraying something more intense. "What do you want, Wesley?" "Dance with me." "That's not a good idea." "One dance," he said. "Then I'll leave you alone for the rest of the night." It was a lie, and they both knew it, but Oakland found herself nodding anyway, letting him lead her onto the floor. Wesley's hand settled at her waist with a familiarity that shouldn't have felt natural. Oakland placed her hand on his shoulder and tried to remember how to breathe. "You look beautiful," Wesley said quietly. "Don't. Don't what?" "Don't make this harder than it already is." His hand tightened at her waist. "And what is this, Oakland?" "A mistake," she said. "One I keep making. Looking at me isn't a mistake. Wanting you is." The words slipped out before she could stop them, honest and raw. Wesley's expression shifted, something fierce and possessive flickering in his eyes. "Why?" he asked. "Because I don't know how to want someone without losing myself in the process." They moved in silence for a moment, the music swelling around them. When Wesley spoke again, his voice was low enough that only she could hear. "Meet me on the terrace in 10 minutes." Oakland should have said no. Instead, she found herself nodding. The terrace was cool and quiet when she stepped outside. Wesley was already there, leaning against the railing with his jacket unbuttoned. He turned when he heard her, and the look in his eyes made her chest tighten. "I can't keep doing this," Oakland said. "Then stop running." "I'm not." "You are," Wesley said quietly. "And we both know it." Oakland wanted to argue, but the words caught in her throat. The watch he had sent her in Dubai sat on her nightstand in London. She had told herself she would return it. She hadn't. Wesley stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her face. "When you're ready to stop, I'll be here." He kissed her forehead, gentle, final, and walked back inside. Oakland stood alone on the terrace, the city lights blurring as tears filled her eyes. The next day, Oakland met her best friend Nora for lunch. "You've mentioned him 4 times in 10 minutes, Nora said, setting down her coffee cup. Oakland blinked. "What?" "Wesley. The gala. Dubai. That watch you won't stop wearing." Oakland looked down at her wrist where the Cartier sat. "It's just a watch." "It's a declaration," Nora said, "and you're in denial." "I'm not." "You're in love with him." The words hit like a physical blow. Oakland opened her mouth to deny it, but nothing came out. Because Nora was right. Somewhere between Monaco and Paris, and Dubai, and last night's terrace conversation, she had fallen in love with Wesley Parker. "I can't do this," Oakland said, her voice breaking. "Why not?" "Because I don't know how to trust someone not to leave." Nora reached across the table and took her hand. "This man has shown up for you in every city, bought companies just to be near you, and remembered details most people would forget. That's not someone who's planning to leave." Oakland's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and felt her heart stutter. "Stop running. Meet me." Nora was watching her with an expression that was part encouragement, part challenge. "What are you going to do?" Nora asked. Oakland took a breath. Then she stood, grabbed her bag, and typed a single word. "Where?" Wesley's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a building overlooking Central Park. Oakland stepped inside and immediately understood that this was different from Monaco. She wasn't here because of champagne and adrenaline and a rule she could hide behind. She was here because she had chosen to be, and that choice felt both liberating and terrifying. Wesley was standing near the windows. He turned when he heard her enter, and the expression on his face was one of quiet satisfaction mixed with something deeper that made her chest ache. "You came," he said. "Don't make me regret it." Wesley's smile was slight. "I wouldn't dream of it." They stood there for a moment, the city spread out behind him in a glittering sprawl of lights. Oakland felt the weight of what she was about to do settle over her shoulders. This wasn't one night with clear boundaries and an easy exit. This was her stepping off a cliff with no guarantee of what waited below. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "Do what? Want someone without a safety net?" Wesley moved toward her, closing the distance with the same deliberate care he had shown on the terrace. When he reached her, he didn't touch her immediately. He stood there, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. Close enough that she had to tilt her head to meet his gaze. "Then don't think of it as wanting," Wesley said quietly. "Think of it as choosing." "What's the difference?" "Wanting is passive. Choosing is active. You chose to come here tonight, Oakland. You chose to stop running. That's not weakness. That's courage." The words settled into her bones, reframing everything she had been telling herself for years. She had spent so long believing that protecting herself meant keeping distance that she had forgotten what it felt like to actively choose connection instead of passively accepting solitude. "I'm still terrified," she said. "Good," Wesley replied. "That means it matters." He kissed her then, and it felt different from Monaco. That first night had been about desire and chemistry, and the thrill of breaking her own rules. This was about something deeper. This was about trust and vulnerability, and the terrifying possibility that maybe she could have this without losing herself in the process. Oakland kissed him back with an intensity that surprised them both, her hands fisting in his shirt as she pulled him closer. Wesley's arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her slightly as he deepened the kiss, and Oakland felt every wall she had built begin to crumble. They made their way to the bedroom in a tangle of breathless kisses and discarded clothing, the tension that had been building for weeks, finally demanding release. Wesley's hands mapped every inch of her skin with deliberate slowness, as if committing her to memory. When he laid her down on the bed, his mouth found the curve of her neck, her collarbone, the sensitive spot just below her ear that made her gasp his name. His hands were everywhere, her waist, her thighs, threading through her hair, and Oakland arched into every touch, her control finally completely shattered. She pulled him closer, her nails tracing paths down his back as he whispered her name against her skin like a prayer. What happened next was heat and hunger, and something deeper than either of them had expected. Wesley's body pressed against hers with an intensity that stole her breath, every movement deliberate and demanding. Oakland met him with equal fervor, her hands exploring the planes of his chest, his shoulders, pulling him impossibly closer, as if she could fuse them together through sheer will. Their rhythm built slowly at first, then with increasing urgency. Each touch and whispered confession drawing them deeper into something that felt more dangerous than desire. There was a moment when their eyes locked, when the vulnerability between them became almost unbearable, and Oakland felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from pain, but from the overwhelming reality of being truly seen. Wesley kissed them away, tasting every drop of it, his movements never faltering, and when pleasure finally crashed through her in waves, she cried out his name like it was the only word she remembered. He followed moments later, her name on his lips, and they collapsed together, trembling and breathless, and utterly undone. When it was over, they lay tangled together in the sheets, the early morning light beginning to filter through the windows. Oakland's head rested on Wesley's chest. His heartbeat steady beneath her ear, and for the first time in years, she felt something close to peace. "Stay for breakfast," Wesley said quietly. Oakland lifted her head to look at him. "That's not part of the one-night rule." "You broke that rule the moment you walked through my door." He was right. She had, and the realization didn't terrify her as much as she thought it would. They moved to the kitchen as the sun rose over Central Park, Wesley making coffee, while Oakland sat at the counter wrapped in his shirt. It felt domestic and intimate in a way that should have sent her running, but instead, she found herself relaxing into it. "I could get used to this," Wesley said, handing her a cup. "Don't," Oakland replied, but there was no heat in her voice. "Why not?" "Because I don't know if I can be what you want without disappearing into what you need." Wesley set his own cup down and moved to stand in front of her, his hands bracing on either side of the counter, caging her in without making her feel trapped. "All I want is you, Oakland, exactly as you are." She wanted to believe him. She was starting to believe him. And that was when she saw it. On the table near the windows sat a folder with a logo she recognized immediately. Loveand Associates, the first brand she had ever consulted for, a small luxury skincare company that had been on the verge of collapse when she took the job fresh out of business school. She had saved them, turned them profitable, and launched her career in the process. But 2 years after she left, they had failed anyway. Bankruptcy and scandal destroying everything she had built. Oakland stood slowly, her eyes fixed on the folder. "What is that?" Wesley followed her gaze, and something shifted in his expression. "Oakland." "What is that?" she repeated, her voice sharper now. "It's Loveand Associates," Wesley said carefully. "I acquired the company 6 months ago. I've been rebuilding it." The words hit like a punch to the chest. Oakland crossed the room and picked up the folder, flipping through pages of financial reports and restructuring plans. Everything was there. The new branding, the product line expansions, the investor partnerships. Wesley had taken the company that had launched her career and brought it back from the dead. "You planned this," she said, her voice tight. "No," Wesley said firmly. "I waited. And I paid attention. You researched my past. You bought a company that mattered to me. That's manipulation, Wesley." "It's investment," he corrected. "You mentioned Loveand Associates once in passing during one of our conversations. You said it was your biggest regret, that you wished you could have saved them." "So I did." Oakland's hands trembled as she set the folder down. She felt torn between 2 opposing reactions. Part of her felt seen in a way she had never experienced before, recognized and valued by someone who had paid attention to details she thought no one else cared about. But another part of her felt controlled, as if Wesley was orchestrating her life from behind the scenes without her permission. "I don't know if this is romantic or terrifying," she said quietly. "It's both," Wesley admitted. "But it's also real. I'm not trying to control you, Oakland. I'm trying to show you that I see you. All of you. The parts you show the world and the parts you keep hidden." Oakland closed her eyes, her chest tight with emotions she couldn't name. She wanted to trust this. She wanted to believe that Wesley's attention was love rather than possession. But the fear that had governed her life for so long was screaming at her to run before she got hurt again. "I need time," she said. Wesley nodded, his expression unreadable. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." Oakland grabbed her dress from the bedroom and left before she could change her mind, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She made it to the elevator before the tears started, and by the time she reached the lobby, she knew the truth she had been avoiding. She was falling in love with Wesley Parker. And it was the most terrifying thing she had ever done. 2 days after New York, Oakland received a message from Wesley with a single line and coordinates. "No work, no cities, just us. Will you come?" She stared at her phone for 20 minutes. Every rational part of her screamed, this was a mistake. But the coordinates led to a private island off the coast of Greece, and despite every warning bell, Oakland found herself booking a flight. She arrived at sunset, a small boat ferrying her to a villa that emerged from the cliffside itself. White stone and endless glass, olive trees, and bougainvillea spilling over terraces overlooking impossibly blue water. Wesley was waiting on the dock, dressed in linen, more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. "You came," he said, reaching for her bag. "I'm still deciding if that was smart," Oakland replied. Wesley's smile was soft. "You have all weekend to figure it out." The villa was stunning in its simplicity. No staff, no distractions, just the 2 of them, and waves against rock. It should have felt like a trap. Instead, it felt like permission to breathe. They spent the first evening on the terrace, sharing wine and a meal Wesley had prepared. Oakland watched him move around the kitchen with surprising ease. "You cook," she observed. "I do a lot of things that might surprise you," Wesley said, setting a plate before her. "Like buying hotels in every city I work in? Like making sure I can take care of myself without relying on anyone else." There was something in his tone that made Oakland pause. She had spent so much time protecting her own wounds that she hadn't considered Wesley might be carrying his own. "Tell me about your family," she said quietly. Wesley's hand stilled on his wine glass. For a moment, she thought he might deflect. But then he spoke, voice steady but edged with something raw. "My father left when I was 8. He had another family, a better one apparently, with old money and social standing. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. She died when I was 22, right before my first major business deal closed. She never got to see that I made something of myself." Oakland's chest tightened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," Wesley said. "It made me who I am. But it also made me believe I had to earn my place everywhere. That nothing was mine, unless I fought for it." "Is that what you're doing with me?" Oakland asked. "Fighting for me?" Wesley met her gaze, unflinching. "Yes, because you're worth fighting for." The words settled over her like a weight. She had spent years believing that if someone truly wanted her, they wouldn't have to fight. But maybe that was the lie. Maybe love wasn't about ease. Maybe it was about choosing someone even when it was hard. "Owen proposed to me," Oakland said suddenly. "The night he chose his family over me, he had a ring in his pocket. But when his parents told him I wasn't suitable, he put the ring away and told me he was sorry." Wesley's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "I waited in the rain for 2 hours, thinking he would change his mind, thinking love would be enough. But it wasn't. And I promised myself I would never wait for someone like that again." "You're not waiting for me," Wesley said quietly. "You're here. By choice." Oakland's throat tightened. He was right. She wasn't waiting. She was choosing. And that terrified her more than anything. That night, they made love slowly, without the urgency of New York or the desperation of Monaco. Wesley's touch was reverent, his hands mapping her body like he was memorizing every curve. Oakland let herself sink into the sensation, let herself be vulnerable in a way she never had before. When he whispered that she was beautiful, she believed him. When he told her he wasn't going anywhere, she wanted to believe that too. His palms slid down her thighs with agonizing slowness, spreading them gently as his mouth followed the path his hands had traced. Oakland let herself sink into the sensation. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in sheets that smelled like salt air and lavender, windows open to the sound of the sea. Wesley's fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder, and Oakland felt something inside her settle. "I could stay here forever," she said without thinking. "Then stay." "You know I can't." "Why not?" "Because I have a life, a career, responsibilities." Wesley propped himself up on one elbow. "And none of those things require you to be alone." Oakland wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come, because he was right. She had built her entire life around the belief that independence meant isolation, that safety meant distance. But lying here with Wesley, feeling more seen than she ever had, she was beginning to question everything. The weekend unfolded in quiet moments and unexpected laughter. They cooked together, swam in the ocean, argued about books and vulnerability. Wesley told her about the first company he built, about the fear it would fail and prove his father right. Oakland told him about choosing self-preservation over love every time since Owen. "Until now," Wesley said. "I haven't chosen you," Oakland protested, but the lie was thin. "Haven't you?" She had. Somewhere between Monaco and this island that felt like the edge of the world, she had chosen him. And the realization made her want to run and stay in equal measure. On their last morning, they watched the sunrise from the terrace, wrapped in blankets. Wesley's arm was around her shoulders, and Oakland let herself lean into him. "Come back to New York with me," Wesley said. Oakland's chest tightened. "Wesley, not forever, just for a week. Let me show you what this could look like." She wanted to say yes. The words sat on her tongue, ready to fall. But fear wrapped around her throat and choked it back. "I can't," she whispered. Wesley didn't argue. He just held her tighter, and when Oakland finally pulled away to pack, She felt like she was leaving a piece of herself behind. The boat was waiting at the dock. Oakland stood with her bag in hand, trying to find words that wouldn't come. Wesley watched her with patient understanding. Before she could stop herself, she closed the distance and kissed him. It wasn't desperate or hungry. It was soft and lingering, tender in a way that felt like a promise she wasn't ready to make out loud. Wesley's hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. And when they pulled apart, Oakland could see everything she was feeling reflected in his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. Oakland nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Then she turned and stepped onto the boat, forcing herself not to look back until they were pulling away. When she finally did, Wesley was still standing there, watching her go with the kind of patience that spoke of permanence rather than pursuit. And that was when she knew the truth she had been running from since Monaco. She was in love with Wesley Parker, completely, terrifyingly, irrevocably in love. And she had no idea what to do about it. Oakland lasted 3 days before the panic set in. She had returned to London from the island, with every intention of processing what had happened. Rationally. Of taking time to think through her feelings before making any decisions. But rational thought required distance, and distance was impossible when every surface in her apartment seemed to carry the ghost of Wesley's presence. The watch he had given her sat on her nightstand. The memory of his voice saying, "I'm not going anywhere," played on loop in her head. And underneath it all was the truth she had been trying to outrun since Monaco. She was in love with him. The realization didn't come as a relief. It came as terror, sharp and suffocating, wrapping around her chest until she couldn't breathe. Because love meant vulnerability. Love meant giving someone the power to destroy you. And Oakland had spent a decade building walls specifically designed to prevent that kind of destruction. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She ran. She stopped answering Wesley's calls. She deleted his messages without reading them. When he sent flowers to her apartment, she gave them to her neighbor. When he emailed asking if she was okay, she archived it and pretended she hadn't seen it. And when the silence between them stretched from days into weeks, she convinced herself that this was for the best. That cutting him off completely was kinder than letting him hope for something she couldn't give. "This is how I survive," she told herself. "This is what keeps me whole." But the lie tasted bitter even as she repeated it. Oakland threw herself into work with a desperation that bordered on reckless. She accepted a crisis management contract in Milan for a luxury jewelry brand, facing a scandal, the kind of high-pressure assignment that would normally energize her. Instead, she moved through the days on autopilot, conducting meetings and drafting strategies while feeling nothing but hollow exhaustion. At night, alone in her hotel room, she would pull up her phone and hover over Wesley's contact, her thumb trembling over the call button. She never pressed it, but she couldn't bring herself to delete his number either. 2 months after the island, Oakland saw Wesley's name in the Financial Times. Parker Industries acquires majority stake in European Hospitality Group. She stared at the headline, her coffee going cold in her hand. The article detailed Wesley's latest acquisition, complete with quotes about strategic expansion and market positioning. There was a photo of him at the signing, dressed in a sharp navy suit, his expression controlled and professional. He looked exactly like the man she had met in Monaco, untouchable, focused. Nothing like the man who had cooked for her on a Greek island and told her about his mother with tears in his eyes. Oakland closed the article and set her phone down, but the image stayed with her. She saw his name everywhere after that, in business journals, on financial news sites, mentioned in passing during industry conferences. Each mention was a small knife to the chest, a reminder of what she had walked away from. Her best friend Nora called on a Tuesday evening, her voice sharp with concern. "You've been in Milan for 6 weeks," Nora said. "When are you coming home?" "When the contract is finished." "Oakland, you sound exhausted." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You've been miserable since you got back from that island. And before you lie to me again. I already know why." Oakland closed her eyes. "Nora, "You're in love with him," Nora said, "and you're running because you're terrified. But running doesn't make you safe, love. It just makes you miserable." The words hit harder than Oakland wanted to admit. She ended the call shortly after, promising to think about what Nora had said. But thinking about it only made the ache in her chest worse. Because Nora was right. Oakland wasn't safe. She was just empty. And for the first time in 10 years, she wasn't sure survival was worth the cost. 1 week after Nora's call, Oakland was sitting in her Milan hotel room, reviewing final revisions to the crisis management proposal, when her phone lit up with a news alert. Parker Industries relaunches. Laurent and Associates with original consultant, credited as strategic architect. Her breath caught. She clicked on the article with trembling fingers, her heart pounding as she scanned the press release. Wesley had done more than rebuild the company that had launched her career. He had publicly acknowledged her role in its original success, crediting her strategic vision as the foundation for the relaunch. The announcement included quotes praising her expertise, her innovation, her impact on the luxury consulting industry. It was professional, it was generous, and it had nothing to do with winning her back. Oakland stared at the screen, a complicated knot of emotions tightening in her chest. Anger that he would make such a public gesture without warning her. Confusion about his motives. And underneath it all, something that felt dangerously close to hope. She booked a flight to New York before she could talk herself out of it. Wesley's office occupied the top floor of a sleek building in Midtown, all glass and steel and carefully curated minimalism. His assistant tried to stop her, but Oakland walked past with the kind of authority that came from months of managing crises for people far more intimidating than a protective executive assistant. Wesley was standing at the window when she entered, his back to the door, his posture relaxed in a way that made her irrationally angry. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and the expression on his face was maddeningly calm. "Oakland," he said, "I wasn't expecting you." "Why would you do this?" she demanded, holding up her phone with the article still displayed on the screen. Wesley glanced at it. Then back at her. "Do what?" "Don't play games with me, Wesley. The press release. Laurent and Associates, crediting me publicly." "You deserved the recognition," he said simply. "Your work on that company was exceptional. It seemed wrong that no one knew about it." "This has nothing to do with recognition," Oakland said, her voice rising. "This is you trying to manipulate me into coming back." Wesley's jaw tightened slightly, the first crack in his controlled facade. "Is that what you think? That I would use your career as leverage? You've done it before. Paris, Dubai, the island. Those were opportunities to see you," Wesley said. "This is different. This is about making sure the world knows what you're capable of, regardless of whether you ever speak to me again." The words landed with more weight than Oakland expected. She wanted to argue, to find the hidden agenda, the manipulation she was certain must be there. But Wesley's expression was open, honest, and entirely too sincere. "I don't understand you," she said quietly. "I know. You bought companies just to be near me. You sent gifts. You orchestrated meetings. And now you're giving me public credit for work I did years ago. What are you trying to prove?" Wesley moved closer, and Oakland forced herself to stand her ground even as her pulse quickened. He stopped, close enough that she could see the faint lines of exhaustion around his eyes. "I'm not trying to prove anything," he said. "I'm trying to show you that loving you doesn't mean controlling you. It means supporting you, even when that support has nothing to do with whether you choose me." Oakland's throat tightened. "Why?" "Because you're worth it," Wesley said simply. "With or without me." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to close the distance between them and tell him she was sorry, that she had been running from something that had never been a threat. But the fear that had governed her life for so long wouldn't let her. "I can't do this," she whispered. Wesley's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "I know. You should hate me. I could never hate you." "Why not?" Oakland's voice cracked. "I keep pushing you away. I keep running." Wesley reached up, his hand hovering near her face for a moment, before he let it drop. "Because I love you. And love doesn't come with conditions, Oakland. It doesn't demand that you be ready or certain or unafraid. It just is. The words broke something inside her. But she couldn't let herself fall apart. Not here. Not now. I need to go, she said. Wesley stepped back, giving her space. Okay. That's it. You're not going to chase me. Try to convince me to stay. No, Wesley said quietly. I won't trap you, Oakland. If you want to leave, I'll let you leave. I'll always let you leave. It was exactly what she had asked for, and it shattered her more completely than any pursuit could have. Oakland turned and walked out of his office, her vision blurring as she made her way to the elevator. She didn't look back. She couldn't. But when she reached her hotel room that night, alone in the dark with nothing but the sound of the city outside her window, she finally let herself admit the truth. She had just pushed away the best thing that had ever happened to her. And this time, she wasn't sure she could survive the loss. 3 months felt like 3 years. Oakland had returned to her routine with mechanical precision. She accepted contracts in London, Paris, Singapore. She managed crises for luxury brands facing scandals and hostile takeovers. She moved through her days with the same controlled efficiency that had defined her career. But something fundamental had shifted. The work that used to energize her now felt hollow, and the distance she had once craved felt more like isolation than safety. And through it all, Wesley was there. Not chasing, not pursuing, just existing in the same world she occupied, close enough to notice but far enough to respect the boundary she had drawn. She saw his name in the Financial Times, announcing a new acquisition. She received a professional email from his team, requesting her assessment on a potential investment, her fee paid in full, whether she accepted or not. She spotted him across the room at an industry conference in Dubai, his attention focused on a conversation with investors, his presence commanding without demanding. He never approached her. He never sent personal messages. He simply remained present in her orbit, steady and consistent, like gravity she couldn't escape even if she wanted to. Oakland found herself looking for him at every event, her heart skipping when she caught glimpses of him across crowded rooms. She told herself it was just residual attachment, that eventually the pull would fade. But 3 months in, it had only grown stronger. Nora noticed during one of their regular video calls. "You're doing it again," Nora said, setting down her wine glass with deliberate precision. "Doing what?" "Talking about him. You've mentioned Wesley 4 times in the last 20 minutes, and each time you pretend it's purely professional observation." Oakland looked away from the screen. "It is professional. You're tracking his movements, like he's the only thing that matters in your industry. That's not professional, love. That's longing." The word hit harder than it should have. Because Nora was right. Oakland wasn't just aware of Wesley's presence. She was hyper-aware of it, cataloging every appearance, every business move, every moment where their paths almost crossed, but didn't. "He's not chasing me," Oakland said quietly. "No," Nora agreed. "He's doing something much harder. He's waiting." "What's the difference?" Chasing is about what he wants. Waiting is about respecting what you need. And from what you've told me, no one has ever waited for you like this before. The observation settled into Oakland's chest like a weight. Owen hadn't waited. He had chosen the easier path the moment resistance appeared. The men before and after him had either disappeared at the first sign of her boundaries or pushed past them without permission. But Wesley had done neither. He had simply remained, present but patient, existing without pressure. It was the most terrifying and beautiful thing anyone had ever done for her. The turning point came at a charity gala in London. Oakland had almost declined the invitation, but the event was too high profile to skip. She arrived late, slipping into the ballroom in a silver gown that made her feel armored and exposed in equal measure. She was making polite conversation with a potential client when she felt it, that familiar shift in the air that told her Wesley was in the room. She turned and found him across the space, standing near the bar in a tuxedo that made him look unfairly elegant. Their eyes met for a brief electric moment. Wesley's expression was calm, unreadable. He inclined his head in polite acknowledgement, the kind of gesture one professional gives another at a networking event. And then he turned away. No approach, no attempt at conversation, just a courteous nod and a deliberate choice to give her space. Oakland's chest tightened painfully. She watched him move through the crowd, engaging in conversations with other attendees, his focus never drifting back to her. He was doing exactly what he had promised in his office 3 months ago. He was letting her go. And she finally understood the difference between obsession and consistency. Obsession would have cornered her at this gala, would have demanded her attention, would have made her inability to escape feel like proof of his devotion. But consistency was this: showing up to the same events, existing in the same professional circles, remaining available without being intrusive. It was respect wrapped in patience, love expressed through restraint. Owen had given up the moment loving her became inconvenient. Wesley had stayed even when she made it impossible. Oakland left the gala early, her mind racing. She spent the entire cab ride back to her apartment, turning over every interaction from the past 6 months. Monaco, Paris, Dubai, the island, New York. The public gesture that had supported her career without strings attached. The 3 months of consistent presence without pursuit. Wesley Parker had been fighting for her the entire time. But he had been fighting by proving he was different from everyone who had hurt her before. He wasn't trying to trap her. He was trying to show her that she was free to choose him, and that he would still be there whenever she was ready. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She was in love with him. She had been in love with him since that first night in Monaco, maybe longer. And she had spent months running from the one person who had never asked her to be anything other than exactly who she was. Oakland sat in her apartment that night, staring at her phone. Wesley's contact was still there, saved under his full name like a business associate, rather than the man who had quietly rearranged his entire world to make space for her. She could keep running. She could let fear win again. Or she could do the thing that terrified her most. She could fight for him the way he had fought for her. Oakland stood, grabbed her coat and walked out the door. She knew where Wesley lived. She had known since New York, had memorized the address even as she told herself she would never use it. It was time to stop running. It was time to choose. Wesley's penthouse was exactly as Oakland remembered it. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, minimalist furniture that somehow felt warm, the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the air. She stood in the elevator as it climbed to his floor, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. She hadn't called ahead, hadn't warned him she was coming. She had simply gotten on a plane to New York and shown up at his building, using the kind of reckless courage that came from knowing she had already lost everything that mattered. The elevator doors opened directly into his apartment. Wesley was standing near the windows, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his jacket discarded and his shirt sleeves rolled up. He turned when he heard the elevator, and the expression on his face was carefully neutral, guarded in a way she had never seen before. "Oakland," he said, his voice even. "I wasn't expecting you." "I know." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Can I come in?" Wesley gestured to the living room, his movements controlled. "You're already in." She deserved that. She deserved the distance in his tone, the way he didn't move closer, the careful way he was holding himself back. She had spent 6 months pushing him away, and now she had to earn her way back. Oakland stepped further into the apartment, her hands trembling slightly. "I need to talk to you." "About what?" Wesley took a sip of his whiskey, his eyes never leaving hers. "Another reason why this won't work? Another city you need to run to?" The words were sharp, cutting in a way Wesley had never been with her before. But underneath the sharpness was something else. Pain. The kind of pain that came from loving someone who kept leaving. "I came to apologize," Oakland said quietly. "For which time?" Wesley set his glass down with deliberate precision. "Monaco? Paris? The island? New York? You've given me a lot to choose from." "For all of it," she said. For running, for pushing you away, for being too afraid to see what was right in front of me. Wesley's jaw tightened. You're good at apologies, Oakland. You're even better at running. So forgive me if I don't immediately accept this at face value. I'm not running anymore. You always say that, Wesley said, his voice rough with frustration. And then, the moment things get real, the moment you actually have to trust me, you disappear. You always run. Why should this time be different? The question hung between them, heavy with months of accumulated hurt. Oakland took a breath, forcing herself to hold his gaze, even as her eyes burned with unshed tears. Because I'm in love with you, she said. And it terrifies me. Wesley's expression flickered. Something raw and unguarded flashing across his face before he controlled it. Love shouldn't feel like survival, Oakland. I know, she whispered. I know it shouldn't. But I spent 10 years building walls because I watched everyone I loved choose something else. My father, Owen. And I convinced myself that being alone was safer than risking that again. And yet you gave me that power anyway, Wesley said quietly. The moment you walked into my suite in Monaco, you gave it to me. You just spent 6 months pretending you didn't. You're right. Oakland's voice cracked. I did. And it scared me so much I ran for 6 months. But I'm done running. I'm done letting fear make my choices. Wesley moved closer, finally closing some of the distance between them. I've been here for 6 months, waiting, giving you space, respecting every boundary you set. How much longer do I have to prove I'm not going anywhere? I don't know, Oakland admitted, tears spilling over now. I don't know how to trust this. You're obsessed, Wesley. You bought companies, showed up in every city I worked in, sent gifts, rebuilt a brand just because I mentioned it once. You waited for months without any guarantee I would ever come back. That's not— You're right, Wesley interrupted, stepping even closer until she could feel the heat of him. His voice was raw, stripped of all pretense. I'm obsessed with you. I have been since Monaco. Since that first moment you looked at me across that auction hall like I was a problem you needed to solve. And I'm done pretending that's something I should apologize for. Oakland's breath caught. That's not normal. Neither is what I feel for you, Wesley said, his eyes blazing. But I'd rather be obsessed with you than indifferent to anyone else. I'd rather spend 6 months waiting for you to realize what we have than waste 6 minutes with someone who doesn't make me feel like this. You want to know why I bought those companies? Why I showed up in every city? Because I couldn't stay away. Because the thought of you moving through the world without me was unbearable. And yes, I'm obsessed. But my obsession looks like respect, Oakland. It looks like patience. It looks like loving you enough to let you go, even when it's killing me. The words broke something fundamental inside her. All the walls she had spent years building, all the carefully constructed defenses against feeling too much, they shattered completely. Oakland closed the remaining distance between them and kissed him with a desperation that came from 6 months of denying herself the only thing she had ever truly wanted. Wesley responded immediately, his arms wrapping around her waist and pulling her flush against him. The kiss was hungry and raw, months of longing and frustration pouring into it. Oakland's hands fisted in his shirt, holding on like he might disappear if she let go. I'm not leaving, she gasped against his mouth. I'm not running anymore. I'm here, and I'm choosing you. And I'm so sorry it took me this long to figure out what I wanted. Wesley's hands cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away the tears still streaming down her cheeks. Then stay. I will. I promise I will. No more running? No more running, Oakland said. I'm going to stay and let you love me, and figure out how to be brave enough to love you back without fear destroying us. Wesley kissed her again, softer this time, but no less intense. I'm going to support you, he said against her lips. Your career, your dreams, everything that surrounds you. I'm going to show up for every success and every failure. I'm going to wait when you need space and fight when you need someone to push back. Just stay and don't run again. I won't, Oakland promised. I'm done running from the best thing that ever happened to me. Wesley lifted her, and Oakland wrapped her legs around his waist as he carried her toward the bedroom. This time felt different from Monaco, from New York, from the island. This time there was no fear underlying the desire. No voice in the back of her head telling her to protect herself. This was surrender, complete and willing. He laid her on the bed with a reverence that made her chest ache, his hands already working to unzip her dress. Oakland pulled at his shirt, desperate to feel skin against skin, to eliminate every barrier between them. When they were finally bare, Wesley paused, his body hovering over hers, his eyes searching her face. "I love you," he said. "I've loved you since Monaco. Maybe before." "I love you too," Oakland whispered. "I'm sorry it took me so long to say it." "You're saying it now. That's what matters." "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" Wesley said, his voice low and rough with emotion he wasn't trying to hide. He held her gaze, steady and intense. "You're not leaving again. Not because I won't let you, but because you don't want to." He kissed her then, and Oakland lost herself in the sensation of his mouth on hers, his hands mapping every inch of her skin like he was relearning her after months of forced distance. When their rhythm joined, the pleasure was almost overwhelming, not just physical, but emotional. The culmination of 6 months of wanting and running and finally choosing to be brave. They moved together with an urgency born of too much time apart, every touch and whispered word a promise. Oakland arched into him, her nails digging into his shoulders as the pleasure built higher and higher. Wesley's mouth found her neck, her collarbone, whispering her name like a prayer against her skin. When release finally crashed through her, Oakland cried out his name, her entire body trembling. Wesley followed moments later, collapsing against her with her name on his lips. They lay tangled together afterward, breathless and complete. Wesley's hand traced lazy patterns on her shoulder, and Oakland felt something she hadn't felt in years settle into her bones. "Peace." "Stay the night," Wesley said quietly. Oakland smiled against his chest. "I'm staying longer than that. I'm staying for all of them." Wesley pulled back slightly to look at her, his expression serious. "I want forever, Oakland. Not just tonight. Not just a week. I want you to move in here. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to build a life with you." "That terrifies me," Oakland admitted. "I know. But are you brave enough to try anyway?" She looked at him, at the man who had waited 6 months without guarantee, who had loved her through her fear and never once made her feel weak for having it. And she realized that bravery wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing love despite it. "Yes," she said. "I'm brave enough." Wesley kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. And for the first time in her life, Oakland Laurent let herself believe in forever. Oakland spent 6 months running from the man who was obsessed with her in all the right ways. But what would you have done? Would you have stayed in Monaco, or would you have run too? Let me know in the comments. Did Oakland and Wesley's story make you believe in second chances? Thank you for staying till the end. Tap the like button and subscribe for more billionaire dark romance.